So you mentioned this idea of creativity and, creating content, writing, and things of that nature. How do you define creativity, or what does that look like to
Oh man, damn, that's a really tough question.
Welcome to The Cabin, a podcast where we interview diverse minds to learn about their paths to building skills and creative confidence. I'm Sid.
And I'm Ibra. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. This is Ibra from Cabin. Today, Sid and I are joined with a special guest, Jim Phillips. Jim is a Chicago-born and raised startup veteran who's been an early member and/or founder in B2B and B2C SaaS platforms such as Echo Logistics, Fooda, Ritual, and others. Today, he's on the founding team and head of growth at Charm, an e-commerce data scraping tool created by the guy who invented Google Drive. So, Jim, welcome to the cabin.
Thanks for having me.
How's your day been so far?
It's been good. Things are going well.
That's awesome. Yeah, so just to kind of get us going here, like we did a lot of research on you, so just looked at a lot of your, blog posts. Shout out to your website, jimtphillips.com, your LinkedIn, and kind of other podcasts you've done. So we're going to talk about some topics that you might have mentioned before in previous podcasts, but of course, we also want to hear about some different experiences, lessons you learned that haven't been covered that we'd love to, hear more about. So I guess officially start us off, since you have done podcasts before, do you enjoy doing them? And what have you learned so far doing these kind of things?
Yeah, I think I enjoy any time that you're exploring ideas. And I think that's what podcasts kind of represent. And, even though, I may be the one that's on the podcast as the guest, usually through the questions and just the conversation, the best podcasts aren't one-sided. And, you can really learn a lot through listening to podcasts and being on them. So I think it's a privilege to be on them, and thanks for having me on.
Of course. Do you like listen to any podcasts yourself? Like, do you have like a preference in podcasts to listen to, or?
Absolutely, I'm a huge podcast person. I love Naval's podcast. It's quick, and he's just full of a ton of insights. I'm listening to a lot of e-commerce podcasts lately, just because that's what I've been doing, and like trying to get up to speed on it. The All In podcast with like Chamath, David Sachs, Kyle Kent, like that's a classic. You're basically listening to like four of the smartest people on earth talk about what's happening in the world. And that one's been great. It's been probably one of the recent ones that I've been really into.
Awesome. And like, do you also have like audiobooks and stuff like that, like readings that you're getting into as well? Yeah.
I buy actual books. I'm old school like that. I think when I'm older and hopefully have a large house somewhere, I can have all of them in one room. But I like the actual physical reading of the book. I'm reading this really interesting book called Born to Run right now. It's about this guy's travels trying to understand how some humans are better at running than others. It's kind of off topic for this, but
yeah,
it's been good. It's written really well. And I'm also reading Anti-Fragile again. It's an Nassim Taleb book.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Sid can attest to that too. Like, he loves having physical books himself. We're always trading back and forth different books every month or so. So
yeah, I totally understand the not having enough space. I'm like, how do I get a bigger bookshelf going? Fragile is also on my list. I know he wrote another book too that's like a must read that Naval recommended. So that's on my list.
Yeah. No, he's awesome. He's kind of abrasive in his writing, so I think he turns some people off, but I kind of like that. He's just a little bit aggressive in his mindset and what he believes in. Another one that is great by him is Skin in the Game. That's just an absolute like blueprint to finding leverage and how you spend your time and getting skin in the game. And I think the one that Naval talks about is Black Swan, where you're talking about like events that happen in the world that would seemingly be unpredictable, but actually happen more often than you would think. And you could use that to your advantage if you're a trader like he is.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess before I have Sid ask you some questions, and I think we can take a quick step back and talk about you growing up in Chicago in general. So just for the fun fact for the audience here, so Jim and myself, we both grew up in a north side neighborhood called Rogers Park, based in Chicago. And I know you and I have talked about this off air, but do you mind kind of sharing more about like what was like growing up in Rogers Park, and like what have you learned that's helped you in your life and career in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're young and you grow up in a, say, like middle, lower class environment, you kind of wish you had things that other people you see did at the time. But as you get older, you kind of realize that some of the lessons and having to kind of work for things as a younger person actually end up, really serving you quite well when you're older. So Rogers Park's definitely middle, lower class area of Chicago, but there's a fun fact about it. It's one of the most diverse places in the world. Literally every type of person in the world lives in Rogers Park, and it's cool. There's a Mexican neighborhood, Indian neighborhood, blacks, Irish, whites. Everything is there in one spot. So it gives you lots of like cultural life lessons, and I'm just really grateful for growing up in that environment. And maybe I wasn't when I was in my younger days, but I am now.
So yeah, I definitely can attest to that. It's definitely a great mixing pot of all cultures and ethnicities and lifestyles and mindsets. So many great learnings and lessons and experiences I've had there. So I guess from that standpoint, like, is that where you got like your kind of business or kind of entrepreneurial bug or kind of spark started there too?
Yeah, I saying that I had to kind of work for things, and I didn't like being told no as a kid, and really in anything, and some things that were like resource driven, and I guess developed a way to kind of find the alternate route and get good at finding alternate routes, and being creative in that standpoint. And I think that's one of the lessons that my environment taught me that I really cherish today, is like, as a creator, as an entrepreneur, there's always a way to figure something out. And like having that growth mindset and that belief that you can get past an obstacle, even if you're, running up against a seemingly brick wall. Like, you just need to stay with the problem and keep trying different things, and you'll be able to kind of get where you want to go. So I think my upbringing definitely taught me that, which I now use in business and just being creative.
Yeah. Do you have like any like memorable like side hustles or kind of things you did as a kid that you remember really well? Or
well, most of them were illegal, but petty stuff. But I had to have money to survive and hang out with my friends, and like,
yeah,
and it was, my first job ever was at a Dairy Queen, which is interesting.
yeah,
So we've come a long way from like pouring, frozen custard onto a cone, but it's good. You got to start somewhere.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, I guess so. From there, you also went to DePaul, which we all have in common. So that's one thing we can share together on this program, is that we all went to DePaul. So like, what was that process even going there? Like, did you want to stay in Chicago, want to stay in school here, or?
Where I went to high school, most of the kids were going to like Big Ten schools, or somewhere that to me felt like the middle of nowhere, like these small college towns scattered across the Midwest. And as a city kid, it felt very foreign to me when I would go and visit those places. It made me uncomfortable, to be honest with you. And I didn't want to go there. And so, DePaul was kind of a obvious choice. I had grown up watching the basketball team, and it was right in downtown in Lincoln Park, a great neighborhood. And I didn't apply to really many other schools, and I just kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay in the city. And your first year on a maybe small college town campus is probably way better or way more fun than a DePaul campus. But year 3 and 4 in particular, when you've kind of done all that like partying, and you want to start getting an internship or like meeting some of the people that are gonna help you build your network, I think that's important to be in a place where you can do that. That's just my opinion. I'm sure people, there's very successful people from all sorts of schools, but that's what I was thinking at the time.
No, that's a fair point. I had the same kind of mindset too when I was going to DePaul, because I lived pretty much Rogers Park up until my first 2 years. So it's like that same thought process, going somewhere that's local, but also great kind of atmosphere. I was a commuter student, so it was more for me like being able to go somewhere that's close by and having the opportunity to learn in a business realm too. So definitely can relate. But yeah, so like I also, and according to your LinkedIn, and something that we never even mentioned before, is that you were part of the basketball team too there, or yeah.
Yeah, man. I used to be able to hoop a little bit. I walked onto the team. So basketball has been a really big part of my life forever. I don't really play too much anymore because I got bad knees, but it used to be great in terms of like just exercise, lessons, making friends, and mindset. And when I got to college, I always thought that I was going to play basketball. And I kind of just got there, and I was a bit down that I wasn't playing, and so I tried out for the team and I made it. And it was a really great experience, one of the best experiences ever. It's actually probably what got me my first job, because they wanted to hire athletes, and I kind of checked that box.
Yeah, so let's kind of talk about that now. So like that transition to getting your first job. I know you mentioned to me in person that you kind of didn't know where your next step was going to be. So like what was that whole process like for you going through that journey?
Yeah, so it was the end of 2006. The economy wasn't all that great. There weren't a ton of jobs. I had majored in marketing. I knew I wanted to do business, but I didn't want to do finance, which everybody else was doing, or accounting. So I did marketing. It was a good program, but I don't know that I had any great skills that were very hireable at the time. So there weren't a ton of jobs. And I eventually took a job at a company called Echo Logistics. It was a startup at the time that is a freight brokerage. And as a young person, you go through this story of, do good in school, get good grades, go to college, and you can do anything you want. And all of a sudden, talking to truck drivers on the phone is my first job. It wasn't that thrilling or exciting. But what I didn't realize is that it was a startup. It was entrepreneurs that were in Chicago that are really, really good at what they do. And so I learned a lot from these prominent Chicago entrepreneurs, Eric Lefkowski, Brad Keywell, who started Echo, and some other guys that were on the early team. I was number 20 as the employee at Echo, and now there's thousands of people. So in those types of environments, you get a lot of opportunity thrown at you just because there's a constraint on resources and lots to do. So in hindsight, it was a really good place for me to land, even though I wasn't all excited about trucking as a 21-year-old.
Yeah. So like what are some skill sets that you kind of gained within those couple of years working there that you've taken with you?
Man, I needed to learn how to make a cold call. That is one of the things that I think anyone can benefit from trying to do. And it's hard, especially as a non-business person at that, like not having a lot of business experience as a young person, it just feels so weird to call somebody up without, them having any context as to why you're calling them. But I eventually got good at it after a lot of practice, and the team was growing because we had a great product and we had product market fit. And I got to then lead a team of people, salespeople. So I got to understand management and start to build those management skills, and just really learn cross-functionally how to communicate. And, from there, I started my next company. I was actually a co-founder of this company, but we were solving a problem that Echo had, where there were thousands of people now working there. It was kind of in what we would call a food desert in Chicago, not a lot of places to eat. And folks were leaving at lunch to go find food, and they'd be gone for a while. Selfishly, we would want them in their seat making phone calls. And so we decided to just bring a restaurant to us and have pop up and kind of serve our audience. And it ended up going viral within the building, and people from other companies were coming into our cafeteria because they figured out there was some restaurant there. And that's when like the light bulb went off, and like, okay, this could be a business. And we ended up joining some of Echo's executives at the time to create Fooda, which, is still in existence, has now raised millions of dollars, and, as probably 35 cities it was pre-pandemic. But that was really a transformative time in my life, where I went from an individual contributor manager to like a founder of a company. And I was way too young, and I didn't know much, but in that, with that growth mindset that we talked about from being a kid and trying to find ways around doing things, it served me well, because you just had to learn really, really quickly and adopt new ways of thinking.
Awesome. I know, so you had a question about that particular experience at Fooda. So do you mind sharing that, Sid? Or
Yeah, so I've used Fooda, so that's why I find this so interesting. But I guess, like, is it fair to say that you were the non-technical co-founder and like kind of were focused on the other parts of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So I could consider myself sales, account management, like growth type co-founder. There was actually 5 of us. So it was a unique story. It was my friend Shane and Dustin. They were both in the same type of role as I was in sales management. And we created that program at Echo, and then started our own business. We called it Luncheon before it was called Fooda. The 2 executives that we were all really close with caught wind of it, and it turns out they had a similar idea. And so we all just formed up and called it. So, we were definitely fortunate to have some really seasoned folks with us that helped us build it. But yeah, I did some of the sales, led the sales and account management type of, go-to-market strategy.
Interesting. Yeah. And like kind of on a similar vein, like what advice do you have for non-technical founders? Like, it seems like sales and go-to-market, like some of those skills are pretty much like soup and nuts for someone who's not going to have the technical expertise to bring this to life, right?
Yeah, Well, what's interesting is there's all these no code platforms now that are helping people at least validate a product, which is probably one of the most important things you can do in the early stage of any startup. You need to find product market fit. And I think one's called Bubble. There's a few other ones, but they make it very easy if you want to, like, say, create a consumer app or, whatever your idea is. You likely can get much farther than you would have ever been able to before, even a few years ago, with these no code solutions. So that's probably what my advice would be. Like, if you think you have a really good idea, you take the initiative to try to build a no code solution and start to validate that idea. And if you start to get some traction, when you have traction, you have a lot more leverage to get a better technical co-founder, to raise money if you want to. So I would say get as far as you can on your own. And then once you feel like you've gotten there, try again and stay with the problem a bit more and try even harder.
Yeah, validation is key. And like, I think this was on another podcast, but you're mentioning how, like, sometimes, there's a product in front of you and you're like, you see the vision, you see the value, but others don't really, right? And it's like, how do you explain it in an easy way? So I guess, like, what's your kind of philosophy on spotting these trends, spotting these products, being able to see the value before others can, even, possibly even with charm?
Oh man, I've thought about this, and I don't know how to exactly pinpoint it. I think it has to do with paying attention, and as simple as that. What I mean by it is reading a lot, staying up with people who you think are smart in that same type of industry as you are, consuming their content, having a growth mindset, and thinking that things are possible. You kind of have to be an optimist, like a rational optimist, to be an entrepreneur. And so I absolutely fall into that bucket. So I get excited about ideas. And so I think, therefore, they get to have more time in my head versus someone who maybe is a pessimist and, would shoot things down quickly. So I think because of that, I'm able to explore more and see more possibilities and maybe look at different routes that things can go. And Fooda is an example of, I was at a company called Ritual a few years ago, pre-pandemic. That was a mobile app for restaurants and coffee shops. But really the whole vision wasn't just that, it was digitizing local commerce. And, now at Charm, I think a lot of it has to do with what Charm could be in the future. What Charm is today is a database of every direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand in the world. And why that's interesting is because it's easier than ever for someone to sell a physical product online. That's why we've seen this proliferation of Shopify and BigCommerce and whatnot. All the tools are there for you to do so. And so because of that, there's now millions of websites selling physical products. And, Amazon's very convenient, but if you really want kind of a craft product, and there's this whole other ecosystem that's, with that, there's a whole ecosystem of SaaS platforms that want to sell them their product to help them operate or grow. There's investment companies that want to, put money into these DTC websites. There's agencies that want to help them grow their website. And so we built basically the database of everything from DTC, and we've also given them ranks in terms of how fast they're growing and just overall performance metrics. So people buy that data as a sales prospecting tool. That in itself, I think, is interesting enough. You could build a really good business on data, and we are, and things are going well. But we could also build a brand product, which we haven't done yet. I think data is going to be the next key thing for a website operator, a DTC brand operator, to really zone in on and get better at, especially with the changes on Facebook happening and social, making it harder to advertise. You need to have better control of your data. And then second, from a consumer standpoint, there isn't yet a great way to discover products that isn't ads driven. So if you think about how you come across products today, it's either on Google, where you're clicking on the top link that is, someone has paid to be there, or you are getting served an ad based on some, browsing you've done on a social platform. So I think discovery is going to be one of the next big phases in e-commerce and just consumption in general. And we've also indexed 600 million products in Charm. So we built product search. And it's very early on, but what it could be is the makings of a relevancy-based consumer search where, you're not getting ads-driven content delivered back to you when you search for toothpaste or, whatever it is. And so from a discovery standpoint, there's it's moving towards craft products. Amazon's good for the basics, but you want that like really cool, I don't know, t-shirt or whatever it is. I think that Charm has the opportunity to play in that space in the future.
It's so interesting to me. And Ibra, I just had one more before I wanted to give you back the mic.
No,
But like when I think of go-to-market strategy, like I don't know, Ibra and I as well have a very like research-based background. And what you just kind of did for me was like, it's not just about the product, it is the trend and the consumer behavior that you're bringing together and then saying like, this makes sense for XYZ reasons. So I guess like, you know, with your time in go-to-market, and this might be a little selfish, but like, what are the skills there? And like, what does your day-to-day look like when it comes to really shaping a go-to-market strategy for a startup or elsewhere?
Yeah, I think it involves multiple channels, but focus on one channel at a time and strategizing in the beginning, testing your initial hypothesis, making sure it works, having that data behind it to kind of validate that what you're doing within that channel is something you could then scale. And then you kind of spin one up, have it be working, try to automate some of the things that are working, and then go to the next one. So I think that's the overall high level framework of go to market and just overall growth, like that the term, you know, growth, that it's become like a title for lots of people in a team in lots of startups. But that's really it. It's experimentation, it's channels, it's very data driven. You know, you segment your customers based on, you know, lots of different pieces of information. So that'd be my advice is make sure it's data driven and lots of experimentation.
Sure.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess from that point too, is like if you were, let's say, you know, I know you kind of mentioned like, you know, with the economy, you growing up as you graduated college, trying to find job opportunities. As a younger person trying to find job opportunities now, would you recommend them looking more towards like this kind of data, e-commerce kind of trends and trying to get in those kind of industries and worlds? Or like what's your opinion on overall, like what, you know, how to move in today's landscape if you were, let's say, a younger person, like, you know, my age, graduate from college, for example?
Yeah. You know, I think the long term, and there's a long and a short term answer. The short term is like you got to do what you got to do to pay your bills and survive. I think what you should be doing to kind of build towards a place that you want to get to is exploring your interests, and if you have something that you know want to do every day, doesn't feel like work, and you know doesn't feel like a chore, I think you can stick with that and explore it and find, you know, more ways to get better at it and build a specific knowledge. And you know what I mean by that is like sales is a specific knowledge, or like coding is a specific knowledge, how to build a Shopify website, how to run Facebook ads, how to write, you know, all of these like really core skills that you can build just by doing now are going to lead you to a type of role in the future that is going to be a lot more rewarding and not maybe not feel so much like work. So, you know, I think that the young people today are way smarter than I was when they were there, when I was their age. And I've seen it numerous times, but I think it has a factor to do with the information just being freely available from the start of their existence. Like the internet was just kind of reaching its stride when I was in college. Like I joined Facebook as a junior in college, right? It was like it was still a thing. But now, you know, all of the world's information is readily available to you, and you have the ability to learn anything that you'd like, and you just need to have the desire to learn it. So that's why I started with saying follow your interests, because it's all the opportunities for a young person today are much more broad than they maybe were when I was, you know, in that phase of my life. So I would say try to learn specific knowledge skills, follow what you're interested in, because that'll give you lots of energy towards it. And yeah, both of those two things I think are good. And just remember that all the information's there for you, and you really need to work on having the energy towards it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the writing aspect too, because this kind of segues to this idea of like content, right? Being able to have content online. And I know you mentioned one of your blog posts about how you were a guest lecturer at an apparel class, just because the professor noticed that, like he noticed one of your podcast episodes and thought you had a great insights about branding and about marketing. And so you stress this idea that sharing content is important to have, and an important skill to leverage and have. And can you kind of talk about more about why that is the case? Like why do you think people should create or share content online, or have some kind of form of, you know, expression through writing or content development?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think the first thing is that you as the writer or as the content creator actually learn probably more than that the person who's consuming the content. So as I've written things, I always have to kind of check myself and make sure that what I'm saying is right and has some validation to it. And I think in that it's taken me down different paths of discovery about a topic or that I didn't already know. And I've educated myself through having to write about it. And so I think that's really a key insight that is often missed about writing. You in the past, like the school version of writing is, okay, read this book and write about it and hand it in. Let me make sure you know what it is. Writing for just ideas and things that you're interested in is much different. And it often teaches you as the writer, better than the person consuming it. And then the second part is leverage, whether it's writing or this podcast or a song, this concept of leverage in the internet is something that is incredibly powerful. Back in the day, like if we were doing this pre-internet, we could fill an audience and maybe some people would be watching this and that's how far it would go. But today we could record this and put it out and it has an infinite leverage of people that could consume this content. So I think that creating content is good for your education, but it's also an incredibly powerful tool for leverage, and that can really help you when it comes to marketing a business.
Awesome. I know Sid, you have some thoughts about this too. So if you want to have any ideas on that too as well, you wanted to share?
Yeah, I was just thinking anyone who's following the creator economy would just be like sitting here nodding their head. And I know, Jim, like you gave me some great recos, like the Side Hustle Stack and a few others. So clearly you must be following it as well. Do you have any perspectives on that broadly? Like, where do you think that part of this is headed? Like, we have YouTubers, we have all sorts of different creators, and whether that is everyone going to have a side hustle? Is everyone going to quit their jobs? Like, I'm curious what you think about, like, I don't know, 10 years from now, projecting like what the world will look like and how it'll be a little different.
Yeah, it's really exciting right now, all the opportunities that someone has to monetize themselves and provide for themselves. I wrote a blog piece about the proliferation of consumer products, and basically what that said is like you will niche our way into just endless types of products because the internet enables you to find a need and a very specific need and fill it. I think the same thing about creators and people. Everyone, this is going to sound cliche, but everyone's unique. Everyone has a specific skill set that is custom to them. And if you follow your interests, the interests give you the energy to get good at something if you spend enough time at it. And there are way more ways to monetize your interests now. And that is really connected, I think, to the creator economy than ever before. Take gaming as an example. You can monetize being good or just playing video games now in ways that were unimaginable 6 years ago. With Twitch, you can just play, and if you're entertaining as you play, you live stream it, and now you have an audience, right? Like that's crazy to me, but it makes a ton of sense. And so there's these countless examples of ways that you can follow your interest into a path of actual monetization and then start to support yourself through being a creator. So I don't know where it's going to go. I think, there's been some predictions on, $1 trillion company of one person, right, at some point in the future. But I definitely do agree with that type of framework, and that this kind of model around needing a business and multiple people that isn't necessarily required anymore, depending on what you're wanting to do.
Yeah, it's that kind of intersection, like you said, skills and interests kind of get you to that niche and where you want to be. Ibra knows a lot about this actually, with like Dilbert and a few analogies. So it's interesting to me. Something that I've been chewing on a lot too is really honestly how Ibra and I started working together. Funny enough, like, Ibra literally hit me up after a panel, and since then we've been working together. I'm only like a few years on him in terms of experience. And as I was doing that, I was researching some of your LinkedIn reviews, and you have a lot of people that seem to be very impressed by your leadership style. Do you have a general feedback or insight on how you manage and lead others?
Yeah, and thanks for taking a look at that. And this is one of the things I'm most proud about. in particular at Ritual pre-pandemic, I think we had a really, really strong team and like just an overall good culture and vibe. I do think, as I've thought about it more, it has a lot to do with the approach and the mindset of the leader of the team. And I don't know, I always want to make things fun. I'm not very rigid. I'm kind of loose. I like ideas, like I mentioned, and I like being creative, and I'm high energy. And so I think that kind of permeates into the team, but also, you know, that's you hire like-minded people like that. So that's one. I think, you know, you take on the kind of the culture of the leader. But, you know, a more tactical thing is that I would often talk about the why of what we're doing. And it's really important, but you need to do it authentically. You know, you have to kind of weave it into your everyday conversation. And so at Ritual, you know, we were in the weeds, making sure that a device worked at a restaurant so that someone could place an order for some fries and have it like work out. But the reality is that we were on the path to digitizing local commerce, right? Like that's what we needed to remember to think, to give us the energy to make sure that the device worked when it was broken, right? So that's key. And even just, you know, choosing to work on what it is that, you know, we were doing. And what I mean is every Monday we would have this, you know, team meeting. In the beginning of the meeting, we wouldn't talk about metrics. We would talk about, you know, things that we were grateful for. We call it Grateful Mondays. And, you know, the key to, I think, happiness is to be grateful. And, you know, if you break it all the way down, just to be alive is amazing. And then most of your problems you think you have after you're grateful for being alive kind of fall away. But if you start a meeting that way, and remember that, you know, we have the choice to be working here, this is what we're choosing to do, then like your tasks don't become like chores, they become things that like you get to do. So kind of long way of saying it, but, you know, I think you need to really weave in, you know, the existential parts of why we're here and what we're doing.
That's so interesting. Like literally last night, Ibra and I were chatting, and I just realized like I was almost veering off that path. Like I was starting to see like comparing myself to other creators and how we should be X here and today or there tomorrow. And it's interesting to me how these new generations that are coming out are like more in tune with that. If anything, they're very purpose driven and they're doing things for the right reasons. So, I mean, maybe more of an observation than a question, but it is interesting to me how it has kind of just changed over time and how like it's necessary, right? The incentives need to align today, whether we call people late here, like they want to do what they want to do, but like I see it as strength, you know, and I'm curious, I guess.
Totally.
Yeah, like how do you see that, the generational differences? We talked about it from the internet's perspective, but even from a value structure, do you think that's kind of true?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it has to do with more options, and the more options are created by the internet, right? Like if someone doesn't have a ton of options, then, you know, when they're 22, 20, 21, they have to go work for a freight broker like I did. If I had more options, then I wouldn't have to go do that. And I think the way that you keep people engaged is keep them interested in it's human psychology. You know, you are communicating with them about things that they care about and they're interested in. And, you know, if it's just money, like, okay, that's fine. It'll start to fade and you can just make money in lots of other ways. But I think people today are more interested in being creative and fulfilling, you know, a life that is something that they're proud of. I'm endlessly interested and impressed with young people today. Like they're way smarter than I was. And I think that's really encouraging for our future because, you know, if to find a guy like Ibra at his age and listen to him talk and like, you know, understand all the things that he gets already. And it's like some of the past folks that worked for me that they were around a similar age. It's really motivating to keep learning myself.
Yeah, I love that. That's where sometimes I feel like that's where I end up getting my motivation as well.
Yeah.
Ibra, anything else in your mind?
Not no other thoughts. I mean, I guess we can, if we want to end it here, we can just say like, let's go with our go-to question that we like to ask all our guests and just people in general we talk to is, so you mentioned this idea of creativity and, you know, creating content, writing and things of that nature. How do you define creativity or what does that look like to you?
Oh man, damn, that's a really tough question. I think creativity has to do with activities where there isn't a defined destination. You know, you're not doing something to get from point A to point B. You're kind of doing something from a more exploratory standpoint. And that to me feels creative. Although I can feel creative as if I'm making a, Excel spreadsheet too. Just the act of putting things together and making something where there wasn't before is creative to me. And yeah, I think that there's so many ways that you can define it. It's what I like most about just life and existence. I think it gives me the most energy when I feel like I'm creating things. So man, I would love to understand what the dictionary, definition is, but yeah, I guess that's my answer.
Awesome.
I love that answer. And it makes sense to me, even the Excel part, because you're exploring something, with variables that you don't know the final destination. Yeah, Ibra and I, we end our podcast with this question. So I know it's how hard it is. And we've done a little some definitions, but this is a solid one. Ibra,
Thanks.
What thoughts?
No, I agree. I think that whole exploration piece is definitely what drives every creative process. So if you can find that path to exploration, then the more I think creative you can become.
Yeah. If there's a defined end place, then there's a task. If there isn't, then you're just creating.
Right. Awesome. So I guess before we check out here, is there anything that we would like to, highlight? Jen, you want to highlight anywhere we can find? So if someone were to find you, like the next steps or anything, where can people reach out to you, or where can people see what we're doing next?
Yeah. So I do have a website. It's Jim T. Phillips. One of the projects I'm actually working on is called 2 Feet Ventures. It's in addition to Charm. And the idea is I'm going to, use some of Charm's data around trends in commerce and spot areas of opportunity, and then create my own direct to consumer brands. And I've named it 2 Feet with my partner just because, it's taking on the idea of someone can do this on their own, kind of with this creator economy type of theme that we've been on. So I have a couple brands that are going to be coming out, with that soon. One of them is going to be called Recess Kid. It's going to be like a kid's playroom couch. The other one's it's going to be called Gray Matter. It's a supplement but just for gamers. So like, speaking about niches, it's getting really close in on a specific niche, but from there, I think it's going to offer me, with this holding company of 2 Feet Ventures, the ability to continually explore new commerce projects with other people. So that's one of the things I'm going to be doing. Maybe the website will be done by the time this is out, but probably sometime in the future. But that's something that I'm particularly excited about.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jim, for your time. I hope you had a fun time doing this podcast. We definitely learned a lot of great things, and looking forward to see your next moves.
Thanks, Sid. Thanks, Ibra. Thanks for having me.